The very nature of urbanism and urbanization itself has been experiencing a radical change. We have been saying something like that for the past 30 years. A radical change that has been greater in degree than at any other similar 30-year period in the history of the industrial capitalist city. But I'm trying to push this argument even further. We're beginning to accept the idea that the changes are so great that it's forcing us to rethink traditional urban theory and urban concepts and our urban vocabulary, whether it's metropolitan landscape, architecture, or built environment, whatever, that the changes are so great that we can no longer rely on existing urban theory that we've been taught and we have taught to others over the past 20 or 30 years.
From 2000 to 2050, another 2.5 billion people will join the ranks of Homo urbanus, so that by 2050, the middle of the century, when we reach the projected peak of human populations and the peak of urban populations in the world, about 2/3 of the planet will be living in cities. So in the course of a century, we will have transformed ourselves from a rural species to an urban species, and along the way, transformed the planet into a planet whose nature, whose ecology, whose geography, whose politics is based in the life of its cities. So I call this the urban revolution that we're going through right now.
Even here, it's another kind of city. Because we are now in Rotterdam, but if the snow stops, you see 5 kilometers another city and 10 kilometers another city. And so you see no evidence of density here, but actually we are 10 million in this mess.
Daya Bay is a city carved out of agricultural land and designed for 12 million people. That ambitious forecast, though, appears to be wildly out of kilter with reality. Because, according to even China's state-controlled media, 70% of these new units remain unoccupied. Is China experiencing a property bubble?
Absolutely. A property bubble like which I don't think we've ever seen.
Bigger than the one in the United States?
Yes, I think it'll make the United States pale into comparison. It's said that there's around 64 million empty apartments in China, and that's been
64 million.
64 million.
In fact, I would say that perhaps this is the major Chinese urban problem, that there's been such an incentive for cities to promote rapid development that they've been almost giving the store away in some cases. And therefore, they are potentially storing up quite serious problems in the form of the capacity of even very elaborate American-style freeway systems to cope with the traffic that's being generated.
Now, an aerotropolis is basically a new type of airport-anchored city that has all the features of a modern metropolitan center: office buildings, hotels and exhibition complexes, medical and wellness facilities, cultural, leisure, and entertainment venues, retail, education, financial, and consumer services, and mixed-use residential units. It is a globally connected city, a city with wings, as it were, where long-distance travelers and locals alike can work, shop, conduct business, exchange knowledge, meet, eat, sleep, and be entertained without going more than 15 minutes from the airport. The Aerotropolis is also an air logistics center, providing time-critical industries such as high-tech and perishables with speedy, efficient access to their suppliers, customers, and business partners worldwide. With Tucumán connecting Panatropolis firms quickly and efficiently to their global enterprise networks, the airport area will become a magnet for high-value, time-critical businesses and industry.
Because the global economy is based on the ability of the core activities of the global economy, meaning money, capital markets, production systems, management systems, information, to work as a unit in real time on a planetary scale, meaning that at this point we can process, and we do, billions and billions of dollars in seconds.
If you see something, say something. And you know where that comes from. It is the motto of the Department of Homeland Security. It plays over and over on loudspeakers in airports, bus stations, and railway stations around our country.
In other words, they reconstitute us as suspect. We're all suspect. Now, whether you are a citizen, a tourist, hey, if you enter that other zone, so you're either in that space of surveillance, passively, surveying, or you're outside.
The Europe that will win if Syriza is outmaneuvered is a Europe with Asian values. Of course, these Asian values have nothing to do with Asia, but all with the clear and present tendency of contemporary capitalism to suspend democracy.
The point is that there has been this growing inequality, not only in income, but actually the inequality of wealth is even much greater. There's a shrinking of opportunity. It's not just that the people at the top are getting richer. If they were getting richer because they were contributing more to our society and everybody else was doing well, that'd be one thing. But actually, they're gaining and everybody else is decreasing. In fact, right now, it's not just the bottom, but even the middle, the median income, half above, half below, are poorer today than they were more than a decade ago.
There's no two ways around it. Climate change is caused by the lifestyle of the American middle class. Okay? That's it. The lifestyle of the American middle class is by driving around and consuming a hell of a lot of fuel, carbon loading the atmosphere, occupying a lot of land to do very simple things, and also having a life so unsatisfactory that we shop like mad to fulfill it. And it's the middle class. The poor, by the way, behave very well because they take transit, they walk, and they don't throw away so much stuff. They're not the problem. And the rich, oh, grotesque. Yes, I know, but there's so few of them that it doesn't matter.
One of the four forces that I described is, in fact, climate change. And there's unequivocal scientific evidence that it's real, it's unfolding, and it will continue to in response to greenhouse gas loading of the atmosphere. And one of the bits of evidence that confirms this, among many, is the observation by biologists, by going back and looking through studies over decades, the observation of a general mass migration of species to higher elevations and to higher latitudes all around the world.
And what I was referring to earlier about how the responses to the economic crisis are also the responses to the ecological crisis, that's an example of a positive response to crisis, of getting the messages that crises are sending us and developing alternatives that give us a more stable society, both ecologically and economically, so that we're not reeling from shock to shock.
But to me, the big challenge for all of us is to do planning which links the city with the surrounding area of the city. I think it's only at that scale that we're going to have livable cities.
We have to rethink the human narrative. If we are truly homo empathicus, then we need to bring out that core nature. Because if it doesn't come out and it's repressed by our parenting, our educational system, our business practice and government, the secondary drives come. The narcissism, the materialism, the violence, the aggression. To bring out our empathic sociability so that we can rethink the institutions of society and prepare the groundwork for an empathic civilization.
20th century urbanism did not help us become more competent human beings in dealing with complexity. Closed systems of transport, housing, and labor stunted people's understanding of the environment and of one another. The challenge of 21st century urbanism, in my view, is to improve the quality of life in a profound way by building structures and space which embody the systematic properties of an open city.
The question, what kind of cities do we want to live in? How do we want our cities to be? Cannot be divorced from the question of what kind of people we want to be, what kind of humanity we wish.
What Europe do we want? And my answer is, let's create the Europe of the citizen now.
That a generation, this generation, people in their 50s now in charge of Europe, have grown up for whom Europe was normal. Europe was the default condition of life. You didn't have to build Europe. You didn't have to think Europe. It was just there. You travel easily. Everyone speaks the same language, English or languages, French, German, English. You felt European. The European trading and economic system works. You didn't have to think, what do we have to do to make sure we don't fall back into pre-Europe? No one thought about that, but we could still fall back into pre-Europe.
If the 20th century was the era when people were asking the question, what is to be done, I think 21st century increasingly will be the era in which people will be asking the question, who is going to do it?
This is a moment in time where we're either going to create a terrible world, a new dark age, war with weapons of mass destruction, or we have the capability to create the most magnificent civilization that humankind has ever known.
I'm not too hopeful. I think really that humans have to evolve into a more intelligent animal, which will take time. It's not impossible, but we will. I hope we don't try it by genetic engineering, because that will be not natural selection at all. And natural selection is tried and tested. It's been working for 3.5 billion years, and we're here alive and talking about it. I'd rather it was left to natural selection than humans intervene, certainly at their current level of intelligence. But it's not a very hopeful answer. But if we profess to be scientists, we can't be sure about any of these things. We can only learn from our experience.